Hello, everybody, and welcome to Fast Pass, a history podcast in close to 30 minutes or less. As always, I'm Trevor.
Jason.
And I'm Megan.
And today we're going to talk about a topic that I genuinely enjoy, the Second Red Scare. For some reason, this is just a topic that kind of stuck with me. Now, there have been two Red Scares in the past. The first one was from about 1917 to 1920, and the second one was the 1940s and 50s. Technically, there's a third one, which is probably the modern day, but we can talk about that another time. Today, we're talking about the second one, since nothing really happened to the first Red Scare except for some anti-immigrant sentiments. Oh, and, a couple of anarchist bombings, but it isn't that interesting.
I beg to differ.
During the Cold War, there was a fight between communism and democracy. There was a fear that America was going to be infiltrated by communism and that would kill America, or something like that.
Yeah, they were very vague when it came to that part.
Like, who was communism? Russia, Cuba, China, all of the above?
And the Cold War was not a typical war. It was more political. It was more of a political, ideological war with the U.S. and the Soviet Union that technically never escalated to armed combat. Both are trying to prove that their political ideology is superior and spread it to other countries. This led to a variety of notable events you probably heard of, such as the space race and proxy wars like Vietnam and Korea.
But why do we hate communism? Well, firstly, because it's everything that democracy and capitalism isn't. It's a system where the government cares for its people and that all are inherently equal, at least in theory. There have been several communist-leaning literatures such as Utopia by Thomas More and the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx. Now, it finally came to fruition as a form of government in 1929 in Russia with Joseph Stalin. Yeah, we're going through a Great Depression. No, not the one we're currently in. And they were like, yeah, let's go make a cool new form of government. Why didn't the U.S. agree with communism? They didn't really come up with a good explanation, otherwise it's different from us, so we don't like it.
Yeah, so I just want to state quickly that there has never been a pure form of a communist government, because it's always been tainted by human greed and power, turned into fascism, authoritarianism, aka Stalin, Nikita Khrushchev, Mao Zedong, Fidel Castro, Kim Jong-il, Ho Chi Minh, just to name a few.
There were a couple of laws that were passed that led to the Second Red Scare. Like in 1938, the Hatch Act made being a member of the Communist Party as grounds for refusal for federal employment. It was one of the sparks that started the flame. And this law was made between the two periods, not the actual Second Red Scare.
Another major law was the Smith Act of 1940, which made it legal to teach or advocate for overthrowing the government by force. I do want to note that there is literally a line in the Constitution that says you can overthrow the government if it doesn't work for you.
So, now the main man that made the whole Second Red Scare a million times worse than it probably would have been is a man named Joseph McCarthy. Joseph McCarthy was a senator from Wisconsin, a junior senator. Junior senator is basically just the newer senator, so they tend to defer to the senior senator. So McCarthy began making claims that he had this list of every person who was a communist that was in the government. He's going to root out all of the communists from within the government. To root out all the communists, he creates the House of Un-American Activities Committee, or WHAC. WHAC lasted from 1945 to 1975, even though the Second Red Scare ended in the 1950s. The committee wasn't actually closed until about 20 years later. WHAC investigated everyone from the highest ups to the janitors working in the offices. All of these investigations were led by McCarthy. McCarthy went after everyone, especially people who were higher up in the government. This caused some historians to believe that these investigations were just a ploy for power. He seemed like a hero for rooting out all these communists, and now there were many new positions that need to be occupied.
The most interesting part of McCarthy was that he always claimed that he had a list of communist members, but would never actually show that list. The other interesting thing was that McCarthy would never testify under oath. One man once said, quote, "Nobody in the Senate knows more about how to avoid testifying than the junior senator from Wisconsin," end quote. Somehow, no one saw this as suspicious. This man claims he knows every communist and had a list, but was never willing to testify or show the list.
Now, throughout these trials, 308 people were deemed a security risk and kicked out of the government, and countless more went to trial and had to defend themselves. Most notable being Ethel and Julius Rosenberg, who were a couple accused of being communist spies. They were actually sentenced to death row and executed, and it was later found out that they weren't spies and had almost no association with the Communist Party.
Yeah, another group affected by these trials and the fear of the second Red Scare are the actors and directors of Hollywood, actually. The most known of these are the Hollywood 10 or Hollywood 9, depending on the source. So there's a reason for this. There were 10 screenwriters who spoke out against the government's reaction to the Red Scare. These 10 who spoke out against the government were thrown in prison for a year and were charged with a $1,000 fine. Now, this is where the Hollywood 10 becomes the Hollywood 9. Edward Dmytryk, while in prison, accused 20 other members of Hollywood of being communist, which helped lessen his sentence. For accusing other members of Hollywood of communism, Dmytryk was allowed to continue writing for Hollywood after prison. The other 9 were blacklisted, and they were unable to work in Hollywood during this time. The blacklist eventually ended in the 1960s. The full list was Alva Bessie, Herbert Biberman, Lester Cole, Edward Dmytryk, Ring Lardner Jr., John Howard Lawson, Albert Maltz, Samuel Ornitz, Adrian Scott, and Dalton Trumbo.
And Charlie Chaplin was accused of being a communist and actually exiled for it from the United States. He went to Switzerland and stayed there until he died. An American icon became un-American.
Now, towards the end of these trials, McCarthy just did not care what was happening. He often would not be paying attention to what was being said, by having side conversations. One time he even walked out mid-trial because he had a lunch date and found that to be more important than what was considered at the time as saving America from communists.
So you're telling me the leader of this witch hunt left for lunch instead of, following through on what he started? The second Red Scare started coming to an end during one trial when McCarthy accused Mr. Fisher of being a communist. Mr. Fisher was a young lawyer who worked for Mr. Welsh. Welsh's law firm was hired to help with the legal side of these trials. McCarthy wanted Welsh to fire Fisher since he was handling sensitive documents and was a suspected communist. Mr. Welsh proceeded to essentially roast McCarthy. Welsh said things like, quote, "Until this moment, Senator, I have never really gauged your cruelty or your recklessness." And have you no decency? Have you no sense of decency, sir? At long last.
Now, these trials were all recorded and shown on TV, and when the public saw the trial with Fisher and Welsh, they kind of began to lose faith in the junior senator because, he got angry, red in the face, yelling at this man, and the mask kind of cracked, and that was kind of the start of the end of McCarthyism and the Second Red Scare. And the rest was history.
Yeah, thank you all for joining us for this lovely episode of the Second Red Scare. Feel free to join us for the After the Pod, where we will be discussing our opinions on what the heck is going on.
And make sure to check out our sources listed in the description box.
And until then, bye-bye.